Guys, I'd like to get started here, so thank you very much and welcome to our session today on how to guard against accounts payable fraud and abuse. My name is Paul Caron. I'm the CEO of Caron Business Solutions. Really appreciate you taking the time for the webinar this morning. Today's webinar, we're going to cover the functionality of a really great add-on for Sage accounting software called Sage. The program is designed to seamlessly integrate with your Sage accounting software to save your team from your time-consuming and error-prone tasks while maintaining complete control over your entire AP process. Today's presenter is Annabelle Kovacs. She's an account executive at AP Automation, at Sage AP Automation, I should say. And in that role, she helps clients determine if AP Automation makes sense for them by creating business cases and, of course, by providing demos, which she's going to talk a little bit about that today. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Annabelle.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Let's kick it off. What we have on the agenda for today is that we'll want to talk a little bit about the implications of fraud. So we'll first give you an example. We'll talk about the impacts. We'll also cover the different types. Then we're going to address how to prevent AP fraud, which then ties in with our entire solution, which Paul has mentioned, Sage AP Automation. So we're going to show you how that all ties in through a product demonstration. And then lastly, we're going to open it up back to you guys to see if you have any questions or comments, and we can address those right at the end. So let's get started with some of the most well-known tech companies in the world, who you would think would have some strong financial control. Between 2013 and 2015, Google and Facebook were scammed out of more than $100 million. The scammer posed as Quanta Computers, a company that had been trading with Facebook and Google's for years. The scammer created fake email accounts to pose as employees from Quanta Computers and sent phishing emails with fake invoices that had payment details leading to bank accounts set up by the phisher. The finance employees who received the emails were accustomed to processing multi-million-dollar transactions with Quanta Computers, and they lacked requirements for direct approval by the purchaser. In this case, if you don't have stringent approval workflows in place, picking up a scam like this can be nearly impossible for a finance team alone. Now that we know large enterprises are susceptible to fraud, it begs the question whether this is a problem for the small to medium-sized businesses communities. To answer that question, we refer to a study done by the Association of Finance Professionals. Their research found 82% of organizations in North America were victims of some form of payments fraud, expense abuse schemes, or serious wastage, which is actually a 20% increase from 2014, meaning not only are small and medium-sized businesses susceptible, but also that these sort of schemes are on the rise, while the business community's response is lagging. The same year the study was conducted, more than $7 billion in losses were recorded in over 2,500 cases worldwide across 23 industries and businesses of all sizes. Of those cases, half of them were attributed to a flaw in the internal controls. So now that we've identified how companies are susceptible to fraud, waste, and abuse, what are the most common ways companies are being taken advantage of? Expense abuse is where an employee may submit expenses or use a company credit card for purchases that aren't business related or may be approved by their own selves. Examples we have seen are employees trying to claim their grocery shopping as an employee expense or spending significantly more than their allotted amount for travel expenses on food and drinks. From 2011 to 2014, a manager of a Canadian software company managed to defraud her company out of $6 million by abusing her corporate credit card she had. She was the sole approver, so no one was checking her expenses. We always recommend having at least 2 layers of approval of every expense and moving up the management chain, not down. Another example is phishing scams. So this was a scheme used by the perpetrator who managed to extract $100 million from Google and Facebook in his attempt to access a company's account or fraudulently gain access to sensitive information. You may have come across this when a certain email might appear to be legitimate and attempt to collect and steal personal information. And then lastly, duplicate payments. This sounds like the most harmless form of waste, but it's actually one of the most common ways companies get taken advantage of. This is especially true in economic slowdowns or turndowns, when some smaller vendors may be tempted to slip in an extra invoice to try to make up for a shortfall in their regular orders. So the question is, how do you prevent fraud and abuse? Here we will go over steps a finance team can take to ensure they have controls in place to limit their vulnerability to fraud and abuse. The first recommendation is to increase awareness of how phishing scams work. The most common sign that an email is related to a scam is the domain. Domain addresses are unique, but intelligent fraudsters will purchase domains that resemble supplier domains. For example, in order to trick you, they might purchase a domain listed as paypal.payments.com. The second recommendation is to always require any purchase to be approved by the person who ordered the goods, as well as by their manager or someone else in the management layer of the company. Many companies include finance as a third layer of approval to ensure compliance around internal policies, and because finance often has the most knowledge of how fraudsters operate. And last but not least, when a vendor asks for their bank details to be changed, you should have processes in place for these kinds of requests, such as requiring vendors to include bank change forms with the first invoice they supply. That way, you know that the bank change request is genuine and has been seen by multiple people in the company. Perhaps if Google and Facebook implemented some of these measures, they may have not fallen prey to a phishing scheme. While having the capacity to catch phishing schemes is extremely important in today's climate, it takes a backseat to the fundamentals of ensuring compliance to payment policies and identifying duplicate payments. Let's take a quick poll to see if your challenges match the data from our sample market. So I'm going to open up a poll here and share it with everyone. We're launching it. So on your screen, you should see a pop-up. And for you to participate, please select the ones that apply. We'll give you a couple seconds or minutes here to pop in your answers, and then we can review the results. Alrighty, we'll give it 5 more seconds here. Excellent. I've gone ahead to share my results. It looks like we have a winner here with 67%, mentioning that the greatest concern is around reliance on manual or paper-based processes. And this is exactly what we were expecting. It's interesting how even in today's day and age, the same concerns are still the primary drivers in business. So with the solution and product demo that we'll do today, we'll talk about how we can eliminate paper and build tighter controls to help out with mitigating against risk, as well as getting some of those time savings back into your day based on managing these types of processes. Moving on to the next screen here. Jumping into AP automation, at a high level, most companies who digitize their processes are interested in the time savings and elimination of paper, which naturally follows, but one of the greatest advantages of moving your accounts payable to the cloud is that there is also an immeasurable upswing in the sophistication of controls your organizations will have access to. As we identified earlier, one of the most common ways fraudsters take advantage of AP debts is by sliding invoices through the cracks in a company's accounts payable controls. By deploying AP automation, you can ensure no invoice gets through your armor without multiple levels of approval, significantly reducing fraud risk. So my two screenshots here, one of them is showing that based on these conditions, we have that multi-stage approval. Of course, in the product demonstration, we'll elaborate on this further, but at the same time, it's also showing you how at your fingertips, you have the access to approve and reject those invoices so that you get it recorded with a full audit trail listed on each of your invoices. Next, it's also shocking how in today's day and age, companies are still mistakenly paying duplicate invoices. The way we've solved this problem is by ensuring our system is in constant communication with your Sage accounting software so that we can flag potential duplicates. Once we flagged an invoice as a duplicate, it will be identified by a red icon next to each of the invoices, as well as when you dive into one of these invoices in a massive red banner and in bold letters, you'll have it titled as View Duplicate Invoices to make sure that you address these invoices and double check if they are indeed duplicate invoices. We found that this combination eliminates the concern around the duplicate problem. So in summary, the three ways AP automation reduces risks include: 1, allowing you to create the most secure approval process possible without any concerns around the time it will take to manage, since it will be all automated. 2, we will be automatically flagging duplicate payments to avoid waste. And lastly, 3, we'll also be ensuring that you have the appropriate documentation stored at the invoice level for each purchase to limit the potential for paying unauthorized expenses. So next, I'm going to jump in my next tab over here, demonstrating the product walkthrough. So with Sage AP Automation, although, as we've talked about on this demo, we strive to build tighter controls, sometimes people analyze this project from a time savings perspective as well. So if you're ever curious to jump into one of those time studies together with us and Karan, we're more than happy to have those conversations as per your requests. Today, we'll be focusing on the technical walkthrough, again, from the control perspective. So we're going to be focusing mostly on that today. Before we cover our workflow, the way I typically like to walk you guys through the software is by first explaining the layout. That way you'll have a strong understanding of what's happening during the entire time. So without a further ado, welcome to the Sage AP Automation platform. We do support 3 modules: invoices, purchase orders, and payments. The intent there is to support your end-to-end AP process in one place. However, the main bread and butter of our system, the core, is the invoice module that absolutely everyone uses us for. The other 2 are optional, so that if it applies, we can support that entire AP process in one place, and you can add them on whenever the time is right. Currently, we are in the In Progress tab of the invoice module, and this is the most general screen that you'll see. The way we have it laid out is in the very center, you'll have all of the items. So in this case, invoices that are in the In Progress tab up here at the top. At the top here, we have that workflow that typically flows from left to right, unless something's rejected. And then over here, we have your org unit. So within the org unit, we'll try to structure your organization or mirror it as much as possible. If you have a multi-entity environment, no problem. We can support that. In my example here, what that would look like is in this column here, each of these segments, if you wanted to, can represent a Sage accounting software integration. And the way the org unit works in terms of filtering is that if you have a multi-entity environment, you'd be able to access all of your invoices across all of your legal entities within one screen, again, increasing that central place you can come into and find all of your invoices. If you ever need to filter anything out, I can highlight that entity, and now I'll take out those invoices related to it so that you can customize your list view. But the key here is that, again, we give you the opportunity to see all of your invoices across all of your entities within one screen, and without you having to log in or log out or even toggle between tabs. Now, this org unit structure too is also critical in terms of customizing user access and permissions. So for example, in my organization, I only have access to the sales segment. Everything else in the org unit is hidden so that when I log into my account, I'm only able to see exactly what's really related to my activity and department, and then everything else is kept confidential for security reasons. So the way it works in our software is we'll give you the opportunity to create as many users as you'd like at no additional cost. And for each user, not only can you specify which modules they should be able to see, which tabs they should be able to see, as well as which segments they should be able to see. So again, as soon as they log in, they'll know exactly what needs to get done, since you can simplify it to only what they need to see and perform their actions based on. So another example is, in some cases, we've even had some clients provide a user profile for their auditors to the archive tab, which is going to be your brand new online filing cabinet. You can treat it as your history tab, and they would give them read-only access, again, to increase the access to their auditors to reach the information they need in real time. That concludes the layout. For illustrative purposes, if I toggle between the modules, you'll notice that everything pretty much stays the same. And this was done intentionally. Again, we wanted to keep training as light as possible so that once you learn one module, you'll be able to master the rest in no time. For the purpose of today's demonstration, we will start from the invoice module since it's applicable to everyone's workflow. Then we'll dive into payments, and lastly to purchase orders, since typically what we find is purchase orders has a customized process if there is one. And then that way, if there's specific related questions to purchase orders, again, we're open to scheduling those one-on-one calls to make sure that we're able to support your workflow. Let's kick it off. So the first part of our software is dedicated to getting your invoices into the system. And we find that there are two common ways people receive invoices. The first, paper-based, and then the second, electronically. So let's first focus on the paper-based invoices. To get those into the system, the way it will work is you can either take a photo with your phone and upload it directly from there, or the second option is if there's a stack of papers on your desk, you could take all the pages at once, batch scan them in, or even drag and drop it over here. And what will happen is all the pages from the one batch scan will then pop up here on one line. And for you to complete the sorting step, we've developed the tools to make it easier for you. So if I click the split button, I've turned or converted that one PDF into individual invoices, just like that. And if anything happens where you had extra documentation, this is where we were talking about, in order to prove that it's not a fraudulent invoice and you wanted to support that invoice with further backup documentation, this is where you can use the drag and drop to sort out your pages. So now I've created one invoice with 3 pages, another invoice with 2 pages, and so on. So we're starting that digital history right from the Create tab so that as soon as it looks good to go, you'll press Save, Create Invoices, and the splitting step is done. Again, the Create tab is mostly dedicated to the paper-based invoices, so this eliminates having to scan invoices one by one. It also prevents you from having to use multiple add-ons such as Adobe to perform the splitting step, since again, it's all within one system. And then you'll also be able to tag in unlimited backup documentation to support your invoices. Now, if you're receiving your invoices electronically, the good news is if you wanted to, you could even skip the step, because the way it works is whether you choose to use our designated email addresses or our team helps you set up auto forward rules, whenever you're sending emails to that address, our software will automatically pick up that PDF attachment and drop it off into the In Progress tab for you, preparing it for next steps. This way, again, it eliminates having the steps of having to download, save, and upload. It's all done behind the scenes and gets into the software for you right away. So that's the Create tab and all the ways to get your invoices into the system. Now that they are in the system, the In Progress tab is particularly important due to the fact that this is where the data entry step takes place. So if I open up an example, in the In Progress tab, this is where our software will help automatically capture header details as well as dollar amounts down here overnight. So that includes items such as the vendor, the invoice number, dates, subtotals, totals, and taxes. All that would technically be left to do at this stage here would be the line item details. Now, to tackle this portion of it, we've created two ways that we can automate this. So if it's applicable and you're currently using purchase orders, if there's a purchase order on the invoice, a number on it, we will automatically link the purchase order. So you'd be able to even see the purchase order side by side with the invoice, just like that, and backup documentation. So in real life, maybe all three of these documents were stapled together, but here you have it stored all electronically in one place. And now to complete the coding below, you can click on PO adoption, select the line items that you'd like to match, adopt them, and now that completes your table down here below so that you can then submit for approval. If there's no purchase order match or a purchase order simply does not apply, the way we automate the line item details below is through smart code. So what we found is over time that a lot of companies, when they're receiving vendor invoices every single month, oftentimes GL coding remains consistent. So what we've developed is smart code so that once you click on it, it's going to take into consideration the legal entity, the person coding it, that's what you reference as the owner, as well as the vendor. So based on this three criteria, again, it populates your template based on what was previously coded so that you can then simply click submit for approval. Now, if any changes need to take place, if I click into one of these fields, this is where our direct integration comes into play. So if I wanted to make any changes to it, I can type in a portion of the string and you'll notice that everything legitimate pops up. So from a user perspective, it would be impossible for me to accidentally create any duplicate items or create any typos or mistakes since I'm only able to select what exists in your Sage accounting system. So your Sage accounting system will remain your source of truth, so maintaining that control and accuracy and us reflecting it in our software. And that concludes all the ways to automate the tedious steps of data entry currently in our software. That's the In Progress tab. And then the fun part is as soon as the step is completed, once you click submit for approval, it will scan all the data of the data entry here. And based on anything that you like, whether it's the vendor or the department selected, or even dollar thresholds, based on the rules you set up, it will then automatically assign it to the right people in the next step. Now, before I show you that, it's also in the In Progress tab that I'd like to draw your attention as to where we flag those duplicates to help prevent fraud. So if I open up my view here, as you saw in one of the screenshots, it's this icon over here on the right-hand side that we've developed to flag as duplicates. And if I click into the invoice, you'll also notice that in the coding portion of it, it's flagged in red in capital letters, view duplicate invoices, so that as soon as I click on it, it will instantly take me to the two invoices it has flagged as a duplicate, and they also reference the invoice number and the vendor, so that if indeed these were 2 duplicate invoices, you'll notice by the statuses, one of them's in the in progress section, the other one's pending approval. So this one's made it a little further in the workflow. So this would give you the opportunity to simply delete this invoice so that you aren't processing a duplicate invoice. Going back into the software, jumping into approvals. So now we've discussed how to get your invoices into the system, how to code them, and double check that there are no duplicates being processed. Let's now jump into approvals. So from an approver perspective, when I'm approving an invoice, my options are down here below, as you saw in a previous screenshot: approve or reject. If I'm rejecting any items, I actually must leave a comment indicating why. That way, the communication is transparent across everyone involved and also tracked. So you'll have that full audit history. And the approver will have access to all the coding, images, and backup so that they know exactly what they're approving or rejecting. These functions are also available on the mobile app. So especially during these days, if you ever need to access these invoices at your fingertips from essentially anywhere, the mobile app would be able to do that for you. From an admin perspective, this will take place in the initial setup, where we'll build these tight controls so that once you design them, you'll never have to manually think where these invoices need to go again. The controls will be automatically built in place. And so what you'll notice is that each of these modules that we support, they have their own approval channels, just in case you have different people involved at these steps. So what we found is sometimes you might have people involved at the invoice layer of approvals, but you'll have different people involved approving or signing off on checks. So for that reason, you have the tabs up here at the top to designate or to indicate exactly to involve the right people at the right time. So each of these tabs, you can create your own approval channels. So to keep it consistent, let's go over an invoice example. As I mentioned, in our software, again, you can create as many users as you need, as well as you can create as many approval channels as you'd like. So if we go over an example of an approval channel, you'll notice that you'll have the option to give it a label. This is where you can specify dollar thresholds, a minimum or a maximum. And then lastly, we also mentioned that you can create rules off of any of your lists. So currently I have department selected here, but again, any list that you're currently coding your invoices to can be used, such as your vendor, account list, and so on. So we'll select that there. What my criteria is saying here is that for all invoices that are above $10,000 and are associated with finance, right now, we currently have it first going to Bean and then going to a second layer. So we have a CFO involved at the stage, Jack. So this is specifying a sequential order. Now, one more functionality that we have here is if I drag someone over just like this and then merge them, what this is saying is that I'll first go to Bean and then either Jill or Jack, whoever gets there first and approves the invoice, will then complete the channel. So this is to help decrease the time the invoice spends in approval channel, yet still providing the full layers of controls that you need to get that approval completed. So that is how we build the approval channels in our software. In addition, since we're here in the back end, in addition to having the ability to create unlimited users, each of them with their customized user access and permissions, you can also customize their notifications. So for example, again, to help decrease bottlenecks in the process, they can be prompted each time an action has taken place. Or my favorite, the daily notification. What this does is it will ping a user every single day, but only if there are any items outstanding. So this way, they're only being notified if necessary. Excellent. So now we've discussed how to approve invoices, how to build those tight controls. Next, the export tab is where we'll now communicate back to Sage and make sure we're able to sync all of this information. So this is showing you your queue of completed and approved invoices, last kick at the can, and this export tab should technically be called the sink. There will be no need to manually import or export files. All you'll need to do at this stage is select the items that are ready to go, click on Actions, Export Data, and then this will start the syncing process via the sync tool into your Sage accounting software to now update it with this, again, completed and approved information so that you can do the final posting in your Sage software, except you've had this tool behind the scenes to speed up the process as well as make sure that there is no fraudulent activity. Once that sync is successful, all of your invoices will then graduate to the archive tab. Again, we've slightly touched on this. This is your brand new online filing cabinet that you'll be able to access all of the invoices you processed in our system. We have custom filter sections to help you pull up any information you need. So for example, if you're ever searching invoices based on, again, any criteria on the invoice, such as the vendor, the payment status, or even date ranges, this is where you can build your criteria, give it a label so that it's scalable, and every time you want to pull it up, you'll highlight that filter. So conceptually, you can think of this as a file folder, and then it'll instantly pull up the invoices related to that criteria. The second way to search or pull up invoices, other than using the custom filter section, is the global search. So that if you're ever itching to find an invoice, you can type it out, and then I'll instantly pull up anything related to that text you entered in. I can do that with text as well. So if I wanted to come into the system, find everything related to Amazon, I'll type it out and I'll instantly pull it up. And if I wanted to take this a step further, this is where the reporting tool will come in handy. So my options would be to either create a CSV or a PDF file. And the PDF one is unique to us. So I'll quickly show you an example of that one. In the screen or pop-up here, I have the option to choose how detailed I'd like to make the report. So let's select everything so that you see the full extent. Click generate. And this is a regular PDF. So that if you're ever going through audits or you need to distribute information internally or would simply like to keep additional backup for storage, you can download it, regular PDF. And then as soon as you open it up here, what you'll see is on the very first page, it's a summary. So that summary is highlighting the 3 invoices that we have filtered into the report based on Amazon. I can even use basic functionality and type in text. So it's all searchable, my document here. But the coolest part of it, I would say, would be the hyperlink. So that if I want to drill into invoice number 3, I can then click on it and it'll instantly take me there with the header details present, copy of the image, line item details, the approval audit history, comments, if any were left, and then finally, if you had backup documentation or purchase order matched, this is where you'll have it all neatly compiled together in one place for you so that you can provide this information to anyone who needs to see it. And that pretty much concludes the invoice workflow in a nutshell. I'll quickly open it up back to you guys to see if we have any questions so far before we jump into one of the next modules. So I'll give you a couple minutes here to pop in your questions, either in the Q&A box or the chat box. We'll be monitoring it closely, and then that way we can continue from there. Alrighty, we have one question here. The question is it a requirement to use us for payments? Great question. So right at the beginning, we mentioned that the core of our system is the invoice module. The other 2 are optional to help support your entire AP process in one place. And the way that we're able to support this is that at the payments level, we've created a dual sync. So what that means is, let's say if you only wanted to use us for invoices to speed up the process and workflow related to your invoices, build those tight controls, and then carry on with your payment process in-house, As long as you're marking those items as paid in your Sage accounting software, we will pull in the payment details of the invoices you process in our software and then mark them as paid. And that paid symbol is reflected by the dollar bills here on the right-hand side, so similar to our duplicate detection. So that if I click on this icon over here, you'll notice that it pulls up the payment details, the status, so that even though you processed all of your invoices through us, but carried on with your payments in-house, we'll still give you the full picture, as well as this will also help prevent duplicate payments from taking place. So what that means is if you use this for payments as well, and you mark something as paid, it will instantly and automatically update in our system so that it then graduates to the archive tab, and then that way it would be impossible to perform a duplicate payment in our system. Please let me know if that answers the question. Another one has popped up. To identify duplicate invoices, does it look for exact matches of invoice numbers, or is there anything else it looks for as well? To answer that, yes, it does take into consideration invoice numbers, but it also takes into consideration vendor. So we take in both of those criteria in order to flag it as duplicates to give you that extra layer of protection. Couple more seconds here just in case any other questions trickle in. Otherwise, we'll be good to move forward. Perfect. It looks like we're ready to move on. So the way it would work is if you choose to use this for payments, you would then have all of your synced and approved payments or invoices waterfall into our payments crate tab here. So you can treat this as your aged payables list. We will also automatically group vendor payments together so that if you wanted to pay these 2 invoices with 1 transaction, you can select the batch and create payments. So this gives you that tool to organize your payments and decide what you'd like to start flowing up here at the top. The next step, the In Progress tab, is where we will automatically match the payment details to the invoices. Now, if you ever wanted to make any changes to the payment details, this is your section to do so. And if you're using us for payments, the important thing to note is that we also have direct integration with the banks. So what that means is sometimes payment solutions, what they'll do is they'll take a pool of funds out of your bank account into a holding account, and then they'll pay out vendors from there. The implication of that is that you would lose visibility on your bank statement, and then it would also make the reconciliation process more challenging. So to prevent that, the way we operate is we'll integrate with your bank account directly. So each transaction that you process out of our software will appear as its own line item detail on the bank statement so that your reconciliation process stays intact. You can confirm the bank account that it's coming out of. You can also confirm the payment method type. Once these details are all correct, once you submit for approval, similar to how you saw this function in the invoice module, the payment approvers can log into the system here, review all the details necessary, and then approve or reject. This approval in the payments tab over here as well, it also acts equivalent to someone manually signing off on the check. Because if you're ever interested in processing payments through us, we will take care of the postage, stampage, and delivery, and we will stamp your e-signature on each of the checks so that on the vendor's perspective, it will look as if it's coming directly from you, except you've had it all automated, eliminated that paper you alluded to earlier for the paper-based processes, and again, eliminate the manual labor associated with it as well. So once your payments have been fully approved, they will then come and queue up in the Release tab. The Release tab is your layer of control of determining when you'd actually like these payments to go out. So as soon as you're ready to pay those vendors, you'll click your transaction, release payments. So again, this is the actual action of sending them out. Once that's complete, your Paid tab, it serves the same function as the Export tab. Now it's where you're going to be able to make your selection and export these details into your Sage accounting software to mark those as paid, keeping it consistent. And then lastly, again, you'll have your online filing cabinet at the payments level as well, so that whenever you're generating reports at this stage here, whenever you click on report, it will provide an even more detailed report than we went through in my earlier example, since it'll show you the transaction details linked to the invoices, and then that can also include backup documentation. So it's an even more holistic view than what we've already seen. And that concludes the payments module. So just quickly before we transition into our last and final module, which may or may not be applicable, but if you're ever looking to further control budgets, sometimes we have companies using our purchase order module to help build those blanket POs to make sure that they're not overspending based on certain criteria. Opening it back to the public, I'll give it a minute here to see if any additional questions have popped up. One question here. So for support, how does that work? Great question. So with support, you will have live chat within our software. So we have that available here, that if you want to ask any questions, you can do so directly from here. So our support's available between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Pacific time. And then we also have support available by email or phone. And one of the nice things is, if you choose that this is the solution that you'd like to automate your workflow and help mitigate against risk, your entire onboarding process will be performed by your dedicated account manager. So they'll get to learn more about you and also set up the entire process. So that way, since they're getting familiar with your workflow, they'll make sure that they're able to provide recommendations and solutions to make sure that we're able to support everything that you're looking to accomplish, as well as you'll be guided throughout the entire process. Another question here, which payment method types are supported? So again, if you'd like to use us for payments, what we'd be able to support in Canada would be paper checks, as well as EFT transactions, and if applicable, we also have a virtual credit card program, which provides for a cash rebate if that's something you're interested in learning more about. Excellent. So to end off the presentation here, at a high level, we'll go through the purchase order workflow. We do support 2 different types of workflows, so that if you already have an existing PO process within Sage, such as you create purchase orders there, and you may or may not have a receivings process, if that exists, we've developed an enhanced integration where we can pull in those details into our system here, so that you can carry that process in the same way as you do today and still get the full automation by us completing the match and having it all compiled together in one place. If you'd like to start fresh and have us automate your purchase orders, that's exactly what I'll be walking you through for our presentation today. For purchase orders, the way it will work is, if you have access to one legal entity, then it will default to it automatically. So no step there. What you can do is create a profile for any people or any purchasers within your organization to the Create tab, so that they can come in and start building out their purchase orders to build those tighter controls. So if I'm a purchase order, I'll start building out my criteria. And just like you saw at the invoice level, all of these items are being pulled in directly from your accounting system. So again, this is to prevent mistakes from taking place, as well as eliminate time on invoice data entry, since by having the approvals in place, you'll be able to adopt this coding when the invoice arrives and you perform that final match. So the purchaser here can come in and fill out all the details they know. Once they've completed that part, the 2 actions below are either to save or submit for approval. And whenever I click one of these actions, what it's going to do is actually it's going to digest all of the data and it will convert it into a PDF here. The reason why it says purchase requisition is that it hasn't graduated, it hasn't passed approvals yet, but once it enters the committed tab, this will turn into a purchase order so that you can finalize it and perform your match. But just wanted to highlight that this would be customized with your logo and that you can use this to control budgets. So that's your save button. You can even add additional backup documentations so that once you're ready to submit this, you'll have the in progress stage here to transition it. Otherwise, if you've completed everything you know and can, you can then submit it directly for approval. Once it gets sent for approval, just like you saw in the other two modules, based on the criteria that you set up, it'll come to the necessary people to approve or reject. Again, always, whenever you're rejecting an item, you must leave a comment indicating why. That way the communication's tracked and transparent across everyone involved. And then finally, once that purchase order has completed approvals, it then comes into the committed tab. So the committed tab is all of your open purchase orders. So it shows you the total balance. It shows you the amount that has been matched. So it is possible to match multiple invoices to one purchase order. And then finally, it also highlights the remaining balance. So oftentimes clients would use the committed tab to create filters and then generate reports, whether you wanted to examine something at the vendor stage or anything that you like, date ranges, you can build your criteria, generate a CSV, and then start analyzing that data. So that's the committed tab, open queue. And then once they're fully matched, that is when they will then again graduate to the close tab, which will be your online filing cabinet. And you'll be able to pull up all the purchase orders that you processed in our software. And now we've covered all three modules of the software in a nutshell. Again, if there's anything specific or tailored to your workflow that you'd like to discuss, we're always happy to hop on a call with you and have that detailed one-to-one conversation. So it's always accessible, and that can be requested through Karan, and we'll make sure that we'll be able to host that call. And now that we've concluded the software, I'll open it back up to you guys.